Welcome to another Cybersecurity Sesh with Elliot Cito. I am the security consultant here at PAX8 APAC, and I'm joined here today by my guest, Tim Clarkson from Oxygen IT. Hey, Tim, how's it going?
Yeah, good, thank you.
That's good. I know we had a lot of chats in the past, but today's session, I really want to sort of go through, your experiences around what's going on in New Zealand around the cybersecurity landscape. I thought I'd sort of open up, give yourself a minute or so to do a bit of introduction on who you are, where you come from, what you've been up to.
Yeah, cool. So Oxygen IT, we started in 2005 when I came back from Europe. And during that time, I acquired a business in Australia around 2009 and became kind of an MSP provider. It was fixed fee, and we ran that for quite a while. So we're at the forefront of that point, brought that back to New Zealand, and then about 2 years ago, really started getting into the security side. Once I run a few assessments on my own business, realized what I was doing wrong, and then started to formulate how do I take that to the marketplace for my customers? Because if I'm the IT provider, I'm doing it wrong. What are they getting? Just for context, we're 3-4 engineers, 2.5 million turnover, Christchurch, Wellington, Tauranga. Security now accounts for 50% of our recurring revenue. IT accounts for another 50%, and we do about 20% of our revenue on ad hoc and projects. So we really are a recurring business with security accounting for a large part of that. And over the coming years, I see the security part will stay about 50%, but compliance will get that up to 15 or 20%. So the IT side has been commoditized, and we'll see that dropping off. So that's why I'm so keen to speak about security.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you've approaching security in a slightly different fashion than most MSPs I speak to. Obviously, given your background, typically the common MSP doesn't really get into it until they have some sort of incident or some sort of breach that occurs either for themselves or their client. So it's great to see that you've taken a more proactive approach to it. I think it's definitely needed across the industry. There's the ability for us to raise the standard a bit more across the board, particularly for the SMB clients that we service. What have you had any, or yourself, in any sort of security incidents over the last couple of years, or in your career that sort of stands out in front of mind for you?
The first one is I've been hacked myself. Yep, about 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, I brought a business. I had a retiring business owner. Yep. And he obviously was integrating his business into our business. He didn't really care about security, and they got into our data center and encrypted all our backups. Yep. So that was my first kind of eye-opening, oh shit moment. I didn't care. I just deleted them and wiped them again, because being a data center provider, we have multiple levels of backups and separation. But it's highlighted, like, even as an IT provider, we can still do silly and dumb things. And then 2 years ago, one of my largest customers, about 120 users, got ransomware. And we'd been telling them, and we'd started our security journey. We hadn't had the process and audits and all that sort of stuff we were doing, but we're going, you're just not spending enough. And for your size, you need to do better. And they're like, well, we haven't been hacked. We're all good. We're fine. And all of a sudden, they were down. And, data recovery was fine. 4 hours, back up and running the data. Of the 120 devices in remote locations, it took us 4 weeks to get all those devices back online, department by department. It took us 3 months to get them back to normal operations. At that point, I went, okay, let's start getting audits and process in place to actually communicate with this customer. Because I think as an MSP, we can do a great job of saying, we know what we want to do, but how do you communicate that to a CEO or board level member or business owner who doesn't actually, at the moment, they really don't care. So the one, they don't care, and two, they don't understand. And if you put those two together, that's why people are saying we can't sell security, especially in New Zealand where there's no regulation. There's nothing saying you have to have this in place or these standards in place or we'll fine you. So if we can't change our conversation from a EDPR and firewalls to this is the business risk, we're not going to sell it. So I think that was the biggest journey we've been on, is over that 2 years when we started our process. What we do now looks substantially different from what we did 2 years ago when we first started.
Yeah, security is always an evolving process, and it's always changing. So we got to make sure we're keeping up with the times. But I think you nailed something on down that I speak to a lot of partners about. And this may be a symptom of talking to vendors and things over time, where they generally lead with things like FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt, as part of a sales strategy. Scare the client, get them to make a decision, force them. Um, from my side of things, I think that's the wrong approach. It's basically, ironically, it's holding the customer to ransom to make a decision about protecting themselves against something like ransomware. Right? What's your on your journey as you sort of start to sort of change your approach to speaking to clients? Are you taking more of a sort of collaborative approach? Are you sort of offering VCI or SOs type services to your clients?
So the thing we changed is we started, that's where I'm saying our journey's changed. We started with the fear, uncertainty, doubt, you're going to be hacked. We now say it's in the case of when, not if. Yep. So that occurs. But what I say to the customers is this is about our process now about education. So they accept the risk. The risk is theirs. As an MSP, yep, we could get sued, unlikely in New Zealand because we're not like America and Australia. So we can just do whatever we want to do and it doesn't really matter. So the risk still resides with the business. And it's sitting down and having that conversation with the business owner and stop changing from a dark art like cybersecurity is magic, let us do it all for you and you don't need to worry, into actually this is your business and you need to know. Like if you don't know your security status, you deserve to be hacked. You're ignoring it. They wouldn't have a sales team and say we don't care about a sales forecast, but they'll sit down every week and have a sales meeting to say what's our pipeline look like to drive the business forward. But they won't have a conversation every month at a board level to say what does our cybersecurity look like. So it's education, and as you do that education, it's hard and it's time consuming, but you become trusted. So when we rolled out a new service last week, it's one of everybody's invoices. We said, decline it if you don't want it, but here's what it does. It's just an invoice automatically. And everybody's going, absolutely. If you're telling us there is no pushback. If you're telling us this is what we need. So that comes from the education component. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess you sort of mentioned it with the sort of no regulation, no sort of guidance from the government over in New Zealand. I've heard talks because a lot of partners I speak to are leveraging things like the Essential 8 over here in Australia, which is around sort of baseline framework. Are they doing anything to sort of change that over there? Are they looking, based on all the recent breaches and incidents that have occurred over the last 24 months or so? Is there talk about changing that?
Not what I'm hearing, but I think as an IT profession, we need to get more proactive with it. There is some talk about GDPR style privacy data coming through to being a bit stronger. And that's where we're starting our compliance service now. So we're starting to gear our business up so that we can do compliance for customers, even though there's no compliance requirements. And you think there's no compliance requirements, but there actually is. Yeah. If a customer has cyber insurance, they have a compliance requirement. It's not regulatory, but it's like you're paying this money every single year to cover you for cybercrime and ransomware, but you don't know that you can claim on it. We tick the box MFA once a year, and where's your audit trail? So that's what we're working on. So our customers have a framework in place, so that when GDPR or Essential 8 or something else comes out, it's very easy to do that in place. So New Zealand, they've taken the NCSC has gone with the NIST route, and said we'll kind of use that as our framework, which is fine. It's just a framework. I think the conversations we have with customers about start to implement that, because we're speaking about cybersecurity here, but cybersecurity is just processes and tools. I can go away and revise for my maths exams, but unless I sit the exam to know whether I got a C or an A, it's just your interpretation. And that's where I think having an established framework to put your cybersecurity into and then present to the owners like a scorecard, it's like you've got an F. You're failing, or you're a D minus, or what we need to move to at least to a C type thing. So those are the things we're now speaking about in my presentations about frameworks and compliance and having these quarterly things. It doesn't have to be onerous. It doesn't have to be, because there's no regulatory requirements. Yep. We can actually start learning these skills basically. It's just like you learned to build a Windows server and a desktop. If you start now with the simple compliance tools and reporting for your customers, they will become used to that engagement. as they become used to that engagement, you can upsell them on proper security because they know why they're buying it. I got an F, and if I spend $60 a month with you, I move to a C minus. Do I want a C minus, or do I want to move up to a plus and spend $150 per month? But it gives you that framework to have the conversation that they can understand. So I don't think you can take the two in separation. You can't. I mean, I've been focused on cybersecurity, and now I'm starting to move into compliance so I can hold the right conversations with a guideline.
Yeah, there's two things there that you mentioned. I think a framework, at least from our mind, when I speak to about using some sort of framework, it's really just to give you those goalposts. There's got that guideline to do something with. Because a lot of when you're initially starting out your cybersecurity journey, a lot of partners are basically just putting guesswork in. They're just going out and saying, "What do I think I need? Right? Do I need AV or EDR? Do I need backup? Do I need MFA? What's the stuff you need?" So framework sort of puts that into more of a sort of a checkbox that you can start to tick off, say what has been done before, what have other people experienced, what is a standard course of best practices, and I think that ties very well into insurance, which you mentioned, because we're seeing that as well. Because while we have the Essential 8, it's not mandatory. There are some changes coming from the Privacy Act in Australia on the back of those big breaches that we had, 12, 18 months ago. That sort of started that process to basically go through and say, we need to do something more about this. But insurance has been that sort of driver from a standardization point of view to say, hey, we're sick of paying off ransomware attacks and business email compromise and all of these type of cybersecurity incidents. We now need customers to have a baseline level of security, and here's our baselines. A lot of them are pulling it from things like NIST and CIS controls, which we talk about here at Backside quite a bit. All right, what do you need? Well, these are the lists that we're now requiring you to have, right? And then they're now doing audits against that. So they are now forcing that standard because, again, either they raise your premiums or you meet some sort of minimum standard to even get cybersecurity insurance in the first place. So it's interesting how that's been a driver, and I think if we do parallels with other industries around over the years, I think we can see that we're at that point in time where there's that tangible change happening across those different aspects. It generally comes down to, someone needs to be hurt, something needs to happen, some major incident needs to occur before we actually take note and actually do something about it, which we're, I think, at that sort of point in time now. With your clients, what has been the key, I guess, driver for them to come on? You talked about compliance. Is that through certain regulations that are coming out through industries, or they're just being more aware of what's going on?
Stories, telling stories. I did a presentation to a half dozen users in Ashburton, and from that, 4 of them have asked me to come and speak to their board. Yep, can you come and give us this presentation to the board? And part of that is, one of them was an IT manager. He's doing his CISSP. He said, I know what I need to do, but I don't have the story. You're an MSP. You have all these customers. You have the stories about, if you don't do this, this happens. If you don't do this, this happens. They have me in the team, and I say, we need to implement this. And they go, yeah, but that's going to cost us. Why would we do that? So he doesn't have, we are all chief security officers for our customers. Even a small MSP is going to be looking after 500 devices, a decent size one, 2,000, 3,000 devices. That puts you in a realm different from a lot of other people. And you need to wear that hat. And it's taking those stories of get into peer groups. If you don't have the stories, work with other IT providers, not just your partners and the vendors, but other people around to help protect our customers and get those stories. And when you get those stories, it doesn't have to be, you can say, my security partner, the peer I work with has, and for each instance, like business email compromise, supply chain attacks, malware, get a story for each of them. So when you sit in front of a customer and they don't understand, why do I need why am I paying for this MFA? I've got MFA in Office 365. Why do I need MFA on my laptop? Have a story about from you or one of the peers of, well, this guy had his laptop and he was in Italy and it got stolen, and here's what happened. I can go a 10,000 user business. One of my security colleagues had a 10,000 user business as a partner. Yep, they were paying cyber insurance. You can imagine they're paying a lot. Their claim got denied. Why? Because one laptop didn't have MFA. That device was the one that was breached. the entire claim was denied. So we're talking tens of millions of dollars of issue. Bring that story out. And that's what they relate to. That's what the customers can relate to when you go through the journey. Start small, start with phases, bring stuff in and have a story for each phase. And then when you sit in your QBRs and your meetings with them, you're not saying you need bang the drum, you need to get better. It's like, well, it's a business risk. If you don't want to do this, you're not going to be compliant. Here's, your scorecard's going to be low. And by the way, here's the story of somebody who didn't have this. And they can relate to that. They don't relate to us. We're geeks and we speak about products. And even the salespeople, they don't truly relate to. But they do relate to stories where they appear, especially if you can do a peer. Like, hey, here's a law firm in Wellington. I'm a law firm in Wellington. They got compromised by this. Resignates. If you can't do local, go, hey, here's a law firm in Australia. It's not quite the same, but they got hit with this. But bring those stories out. Make up a war chest of stories. That's how you're going to get your customers on board.
Yeah, absolutely. I think making it relevant and I think that the issue that a lot of partners have is they've obviously come from an IT background and they don't truly have those sales skills, or still working on them, right? It's a challenge to be able to sort of pivot and switch up their sort of language on the spot. They're really sort of technically focused. But things we sort of talk about is, depending on who you're speaking to, as you said, if you're speaking to the board, make sure it's relevant to them. Make sure you're speaking their specific language for them to identify with it and be able to correlate those events in their minds to be able to say, all right, I understand it now. I know what the purpose is, what we're trying to drive. I love the fact that you're using that. I think a lot of partners don't use their own stories when they do have it. And I think it's because they feel it's going to give them a negative impression on their capabilities. If I've been breached before, right, it's going to happen again. But generally, we find that it's the opposite. And it's probably the same for you, where you build on that experience. Like you said, you've been hit before, you've had clients that have been hit before, but you learn from that, you improve, you review your policies, your security standards and controls, and then you ramp it up a bit, right? Make it better to prevent you from having that instance in the future.
So I'd say, if you're watching this and you're not big on security, start generating an origin story. I was here and I've moved to here, and here's the catalyst. It was this customer or us having this incident, or we had one customer who lost $600,000 and they're out of business from a business email compromise. Yeah, was it our fault? Absolutely not. Did they try to blame it on us? Absolutely, they tried to. We were like, poor accounting controls allowed, your poor business practices allowed that to happen. Yes, IT is a part of it, but have the thing. Well, this is why we started implementing mail filtering and URL detections and stuff like that, because this customer had this, and build your origin story out of why you're changing. Have the conversations. When I started my training 2 years ago, they said a lot of MSPs, they're scared to go speak to their customer because they think the customer says we're doing this. The analogy I give, I've probably told you this one before, I tell a lot of people, is get a child from home to daycare. Yep. So I want to get my child from home to daycare, I give it to the IT department, they chuck it in a backpack, they put it on a moped, they get to school, they fling it over and they go, that's cost you $15, thank you very much. Yep. You give it to a security team, they put it in a four-wheel drive vehicle with a car seat, and they strap it in and they drive it to school, and they very carefully hand over and go, well, that cost you $80. Yep. If you've got compliance, yep, the cop's sitting on the side of the road checking to make sure that you are following the speed rules and you haven't, you're using indicators and all that sort of stuff. And you get to school and you go, well, that cost me $120. And then we have governance. Who should be driving the child to school? Should it be your 16-year-old daughter at 7 o'clock in the morning outside of the driver's license? The governance is about the internal stuff. And I think that's where you need to start at a place and go, we did IT. That's what your fixed fee or your ad hoc rate covered you. You never, especially ad hoc, you never paid us to look deeper into your systems. You couldn't see the value of it. That's a chance for you to leverage from, stay ad hoc on labor, but sell them a fixed fee cybersecurity. Start to move your MMR into that range. If you've got a fixed fee, people call it all you can eat, but I call it a fixed fee business as usual. Because I charge for projects, I charge for moves, add changes, I charge for other stuff that goes, well, not quantifiable, and go, okay, here's my fixed fee. And have the conversation with them. That covered breaking stuff that was broken. It didn't cover us being proactive and looking into your environment and reading Microsoft's articles every second week about what's, subscribing to hacker blogs and stuff like that. That costs. And when I sit with my customers and I go, here's the work we're doing. My staff members do an hour of security training per week. We're on security advisories. I do research and run seminars. I run webinars. That costs. That's a different price point from somebody just trying to fix your Outlook problem. And they go, absolutely it is. Because they can understand it in the business. Are you a specialist in your business? Because if you specialize and you start speaking to specialists, they understood it took them 14 years to get there. They didn't hang a flag up and say, I'm a doctor, it took me 3 years and away I go. They go, I'm a cardiac surgeon, it took me 14 years. I understand about specialization. So you can sell your security to your customers by picking something and saying, I'm going to specialize in this.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. With partners, though, I think the challenge is the assumption is that clients think because it's security is technology is under the IT bracket and it should already be done for you. And you may be doing elements of it like backup, AV, patching as an example, are typically things that have been in managed services for quite some time, but those are security items and they should be dealt with differently. 100% agree with you. I think the partners are scared to have that conversation, and the longer they leave it, the harder it gets. So they just got to sort of rip that band-aid off and start having that chat. You're on mute, Tim. Sorry. Yeah, still on mute.
Here we are.
There,
Sorry about that. Yep, hit the
there we
keyboard.
go.
Yeah, so I was saying, please don't have the conversations because it makes them a prime chance that we'll have the conversation. If you don't have the conversation, there are people out there, super MSPs and MSPs come along now, who are going to go, we'll run a cyber audit, we'll have the conversation, we'll check your environment, and your choice is put your head in the sand and ignore it, or rip the bandit off and get out there and start to educate your customers. And you can start small. You can start with spend 3 months educating your customers about what security is before you go to them and say, we're going to charge you more. So don't try and rock up and go, oh, by the way, your bill's gone from 100 to 160 bucks a month. Because I look at you like you've got two heads and go, what do you mean? We haven't even had conversations about this. But if you start to release security information to them, start to do some education, and then say, hey, by the way, from next quarter, we need you to be on the security standard for us to feel safe to look after you. I mean, I get rid of customers if they won't sign up for security. We terminate customers. But I'm just not prepared to have my name associated with a Mercury IT, Landtech, other MSPs that have been hacked. And if an incident happens, I had this, it was 4 months after this MSP was hacked. The customers were coming to me saying, now we're ready to start moving. So you get hacked and you think you're all good, but the bleed out effect is kind of starts at 4 months and goes for a year or 2 years after that. The customer will be unhappy and they just won't tell you they're unhappy. They'll start looking around and they'll get everything in order, ready to make that move. So you don't want to be in that position. So the first starting step is get your own house in order. Get yourself audited, run security processes on yourself, learn what CIS or NIST looks like for you. I wouldn't go ISO 27001 because that's a whole different beast. It's good, but pick a small standard, run it on yourself, learn the process, take it to your customers, and explain to them what you've done for yourself. Because that's where the value will be, is that's your first origin story. We realized we weren't good, we did this, we're now better, how can we help you do the same?
There's fantastic points and tips there. I'm sure whoever's listening will take that on board. You did raise something there that I want to sort of touch on, and we might further finish up with this. Is your MSPs are a massive part of the supply chain now, which has a massive focus, and with some of the incidents that happened with certain MSPs, particularly in New Zealand over the last 12 or so months. Has there been a massive spotlight? Are you finding clients are sort of a bit more cautious when working with you or partners
Only
like
if
yourself?
they've been with an MSP who has been hit. They have a whole different level of questions they come to us with. How do you do this? How do you do least privileged access? How do we make sure that when we're working with you, your data's secure and you've only got the minimum rights to our environment? Everybody else is like, they're just ignorant of it. But the one thing I would say is we get audited every quarter. We run an audit process every quarter, and we can provide that to our customers and to our prospects. I set up in a conference and do that, and I watched about 8 or 9 people get their laptops out, sending emails to their MSPs while I was in the conference. They didn't even wait for me to finish. They just opened the laptop lid up and just started going, "Can you please tell me the last time you audited and give me the results for that, please?" And I will. That's the most important thing we can do. Supply chain attacks in 2024 and 2025 will be MSPs, because that's how they'll get to the customers. We are the targets, and I will every single day go after MSPs who aren't doing the right thing. But I also help. Like, I have a friend who runs an IT company. I'm like, let me show you the audit process I'm running against your customer, so you can defend against that. I shouldn't. If you can take that tool away from my arsenal, that's fantastic, because it means as a community we're doing better. And I'll just find another way to compete, because we're all in business together. But there's enough business out there. But I just said the bar's so low that we should be auditing ourselves. And the biggest regret I have is that anybody can go put a banner up and say, "I'm an MSP." There's no minimum threshold or bar to get across. If you had that for lawyers and accountants, you'd be shocked.
Yeah, that goes the same with anyone diving into cybersecurity, anyone who considers themselves a specialist in cybersecurity or an MSSP, which I think is a challenge. And one of the things I've been proposing here is some sort of, not necessarily regulatory body, but some sort of body that's going to take it on board on themselves to basically provide some sort of certification to certify certain MSPs. So you can have a tag there. Maybe it's in Australia, it might be an ASA, or maybe it's something like CompTIA, where we can have a registry of certified partners and that we know they're doing the right thing and they're properly audited and verified that they know what they're actually doing.
Yeah, so CompTIA are redoing their trust mark and bringing out a new trust mark around that. I'm on the wait list for that at the moment because they're changing in between. But you're right, then that's what we need, and that's what customers then should be asking for. Can you show me if you're not there, like, they're not going to kick you out in the MSP, right? You've got a relationship. A relationship's more than just for security. But what you should be having the conversation is, we've realized that we need to do more, and hey, we're on the wait list, or we're trying to do this certification to show you we're doing the right job. Give your customers that conversation. This shouldn't be a conversation we're having.
Yeah, I guess it speaks to experience. Going back and talking about the stories that you mentioned to speak to, particularly your own experience as well. If I use a sort of parallel there, if you dealing with anyone, you generally wouldn't sign up to an accountant that's maybe a first year out of university. You'd go to someone who's got 20 years experience that maybe knows just particular sectors or industries, knows the landscape inside out because they've been doing it for 20 years. So that's the sort of thing that you could use as part of your storytelling as well, is that we've learned from our mistakes, right? We're not flying blind here. We're not guessing. We're using a framework. We're getting audited. We're doing all these other things. Plus, we've got that experience on board from our own clients that have had incidents before. We know the emotion that's attached to that. So I think those are really, really important points to talk about, and something a lot of partners could be doing a lot better, in my mind.
Just in closing, yep. If you focus on security, you stop having to compete on the IT side of the business. And that's where a lot of MSPs are struggling at the moment as it becomes commoditized. We're bringing AI and machine learning automation to our side. We've reduced our service desk labor costs by 50%. Therefore, if you're not doing that, we can kill you on that if we have to. But if you bring security in, the customer goes, yeah, you're doing the IT side thing, that's all great. But if you do the security, that's not commoditized. And it's not as easy to go, how quickly did you solve that? How quickly did you solve that ticket? It's about the experience and the relationships. And that's what's going to secure the customers.
Yep. Completely agree with that one. It's always fantastic talking to you, Tim. We could probably go on this forever. I know we've had some really long chats on security before. But before we leave, I guess I'll just throw it out there. Any last tips, advice to other MSPs looking at either ramping up their cybersecurity or just beginning on that journey?
Just start by finding a standard and finding a peer group to join. There's lots of them out there. I'm happy to have my email address published and And if somebody wants, you're available, you have your stuff you do at Pax8, I'm available to get emails and say, how would I start? I joined this today with you to help the community.
And that's what we're all about. And I think across ANZ particularly, I've been overwhelmed by the amount of support that partners offer to each other. Like you said, there's heaps of business out there, plenty of competition, but more than enough to go around for everyone to sort of tap into. But I'm with you there. My whole story is around uplifting the partner base, helping them drive a better standard of cybersecurity across the board. So really, again, thank you for joining me. Thank you for jumping on. I'm sure we'll chat again soon, but we'll post this up, and
anytime.
If anyone wants to reach out and ask for your advice, we'll give them your details.
Awesome. Thanks, Elliot.
Thanks again, Tim.
Thanks, everyone.